of earlier generations, they work in the lower rungs of media, education, technology, and the nonprofit sector. Disgusted with how their elders have screwed up the world, they are leading a revolution in moral sentiments. From 1965 to 2000, for instance, about 10% of white liberals favored increased immigration. By 2018, according to Zach Goldberg, a researcher at the Center for the Study of Partisanship and Ideology, it was more than 50%, thanks to the influence of a rising generation on the multicultural left. Yet wokeness is not just a social philosophy, but an elite status marker, a strategy for personal advancement. You have to possess copious amounts of cultural capital to feel comfortable using words like intersectionality, heteronormativity, cisgender, problematize, triggering, and Latinx. By navigating a fluid, progressive cultural frontier more skillfully than their hapless boomer bosses, and by calling out the privilege and moral failings of those above them, young, educated elites seek power within elite institutions. Wokeness becomes a way to intimidate boomer administrators and wrest power from them. On the lowest rung of the blue ladder is the caring class, the largest in America, nearly half of all workers by some measures, and one that in most respects sits quite far from the three above it. It consists of low-paid members of the service sector, manicurists, home health care workers, restaurant servers, sales clerks, hotel employees. Members of this class are disadvantaged in every way. The gap in life expectancy between those in the top 40% and those in the bottom 40% widened from 1980 to 2010, from 5 to 12 years for men and from 4 to 13 years for women. Only 1 in 100 of the children raised in the poorest fifth of households will become rich enough to join the top 5%. This hardship requires a different set of traits and values than are found in more upscale classes. Researchers report that people who feel a weaker sense of personal control are quick to form mutual support networks. Their sense of community clashes with the creative class's valorization of individualism. Other research has found that members of this class are less likely to behave unethically than the creative class when put in tempting situations. Surveys suggest that members of this class stay at some remove from the culture wars. They are much less likely to share political content on social media than other groups, and more likely to say they avoid arguments. Many are centrists or detached from politics altogether, but as a whole they sit to the right of the Bobos on abortion and LGBTQ issues, and to the left of the Bobos on issues like union power and workers' rights. Atop the red hierarchy is the GOP's slice of the 1%ers. Most rich places are blue, but a lot of the richest people are red. A 2012 study of the richest 4% of earners found that 44% voted Democrat that year, while 41% voted Republican. Some are corporate executives or entrepreneurs, but many are top-tier doctors, lawyers, and other professionals who aspire to low taxes and other libertarian ideals. This is the core of the GOP donor class, men and women who feel that they worked hard for their money, that the American dream is real, and that those who built wealth in this country shouldn't have to apologize for it. Members of this class are, in many ways, similar to the conservative elite of the Reagan years. Yet they too have been reshaped by the creative class's cultural dominance. When I interview members of the GOP donor class, they tell me they often feel they cannot share their true opinions without being scorned. Few of them supported Donald Trump in the 2016 GOP primaries, but by 2020 most of the red 1%ers I know had swung enthusiastically pro-Trump, because at least he's scorned by those who scorn them. It turns out that having a large investment account is no protection against self-pity. One step down are the large property-owning families, scattered among small cities and towns like Wichita, Kansas, and Grand Rapids, Michigan, what we might call the GOP gentry. I've adapted the coinage from what the historian Patrick Wyman has written about the local elite in his hometown of Yakima, Washington. This gentry class derives its wealth not from salary, but from the ownership of assets, furniture companies, ranches, a bunch of McDonald's franchises. This wealth is held in families and passed down through the generations. Members of this elite stay rooted where their properties are and form the leadership class in their regions, sharing a community foundation or the local chamber of commerce. Below them is the Proletarian Aristocracy, the people of the populist regatta, contractors, plumbers, electricians, middle managers, and small business owners. People in this class have succeeded in America, but not through the channels of the university-based meritocracy from which they feel alienated. In other circumstances, the GOP gentry would be the natural enemies of the proletarian aristocracy, but now they are aligned. Both embrace the symbolic class markers of the sociologically low: pickup trucks, guns, country music, Christian nationalism. Both fear that their children may not be able to compete in the creative class-controlled meritocracy. Both dislike sending their kids to schools that disdain their values, yet understand that their children will have to adopt creative class values if they're going to be accepted in the new elite. As Thibaut Muser writes, the bourgeois and the provincial bourgeois thus have a common agenda: to unmake the creative class's societal transformation of the late 2000s and early 2010s. A level below the people of the populist regatta, you find the rural working class. Members of this class have highly supervised jobs in manufacturing, transportation, construction. Their jobs tend to be repetitive and may involve some physical danger. As the Princeton sociologist Robert Wuthnow notes, many people in this class have an identity rooted in loyalty to their small town. They are supported by networks of extended family and friends who have grown up with one another. Like the poorer members of the blue hierarchy, they value interdependence and are less individualistic. Many members of the red hierarchy working class feel totally forgotten. In her book, White Working Class, Joan C. Williams shares the account of a woman who says she raised 3 children on $40,000 a year, but didn't get any assistance because we did not qualify. Their towns are not diverse. As Wuthnow notes, 2 of the most common statements you hear in these towns are, "Everybody knows everybody else," and "We're all pretty much the same." If educated urbanites go out of their way to enjoy diversity and display their superior cultural taste, one-upmanship is despised in this class. Christmas tree shop sincerity is prized over academic art house pretentiousness. By and large, members of the rural working class admire rich people who earned their wealth. Their real hatred is for Washington, a concept that encompasses the entire ruling class. "Those people up there in Washington, they think they know more than we do," one of them told Wuthnow. "They treat us like second-class citizens, like we're dumb hicks." How the class war ends. As the Bobos achieved a sort of stranglehold on the economy, the culture, and even our understanding of what a good life is, no wonder society has begun to array itself against them, with the old 3-part class structure breaking apart into a confusing welter of microgroups competing for status and standing in any way they can. So, for instance, the Bobos have abundant cultural, political, and economic power. The red 1%ers have economic power but scant cultural power. The young, educated elites have tons of cultural power and growing political power, but still not much economic power. And the caring class and rural working class, unheard and unseen, have almost no power of any kind at all. Our politics, meanwhile, has become sharper-edged, more identity-based, and more reactionary, in part because politics is the one arena in which the Bobos cannot dominate. There aren't enough of us. Into this fraught, every-which-way class conflict walks Joe Biden. Weirdly, he stands outside it. Biden is the first president since Ronald Reagan without a degree from an Ivy League university. His sensibility was formed not in the meritocracy, but in the working-class neighborhoods of his youth. Condescension is alien to his nature. He has little interest in the culture war issues that drive those at the top of the hierarchies, and spent his 2020 campaign studiously avoiding them. Biden gets prickly when he is surrounded by intellectual preening. He's most comfortable hanging around with union guys who don't pull that crap. Biden's working-class version of progressivism is a relic from the pre-Bobo era. His programs, his COVID relief law, his infrastructure bill, his family support proposal, represent efforts to funnel resources to those who have not graduated from college and who have been left behind by the creative class economy. As Biden boasted in an April speech to a joint session of Congress, nearly 90% of the infrastructure jobs created in the American Jobs Plan do not require a college degree. 75% don't require an associate's degree. Those are his people. If there is an economic solution to the class chasms that have opened up in America, the Biden legislative package is surely it. It would narrow the income gaps that breed much of today's class animosity. But economic redistribution only gets you so far. The real problem is the sorting mechanism itself. It determines who gets included in the upper echelons of society and who gets excluded, who gets an escalator ride to premier status and worldly success, and who faces a wall. The modern meritocracy is a resentment-generating machine. But even leaving that aside, as a sorting device, it is batshit crazy. The ability to perform academic tasks during adolescence is nice to have, but organizing your society around it is absurd. That ability is not as important as the ability to work in teams, to sacrifice for the common good, to be honest, kind, and trustworthy, to be creative and self-motivated. A sensible society would reward such traits by conferring status on them. A sensible society would not celebrate the skills of a corporate consultant while slighting the skills of a home nurse. Some 60 years after its birth, the meritocracy seems more and more morally vacuous. Does the ability to take tests when you're young make you a better person than others? Does a society built on that ability become more just and caring? This situation produces a world in which the populist right can afford to be intellectually bankrupt. Right-leaning parties don't need to have a policy agenda. They just need to stoke and harvest the resentment toward the creative class. The only way to remedy this system is through institutional reform that widens the criteria by which people get sorted. For instance, we need more pathways to success, so those who are not academically inclined have routes to social leadership. Programs like national service, so that people with and without college degrees have more direct contact with one another, and an end to policies like residential zoning rules that keep the affluent segregated on top. More broadly, changing this sorting mechanism requires transforming our whole moral ecology, such that possession of a Stanford degree is no longer seen as signifying a higher level of being. The Bobos didn't set out to be an elite dominating class. We just fit ourselves into a system that rewarded a certain type of achievement, and then gave our children the resources that would allow them to prosper in that system too. But, blind to our own power, we have created enormous inequalities, financial inequalities, and more painful inequalities of respect. The task before us is to dismantle the system that raised us. If you enjoyed this production, find the best long-form articles read aloud in the Autumn app, available now for iPhone and Android.